The AR-15 dissected from muzzle to buttstock. That's what we're going to talk about. This series, this mini-series, like the Lonesome Dove on ARs on Gunfighter Life. I'm going to cut this down, break it down into smaller parts. There's a lot to America's rifle. There's so much variety. It can kind of be overwhelming. You can definitely get analysis by paralysis looking at ARs and different features. And do I need this? And is free float really important to me? And what is a muzzle brake anyway? Is it really going to make a difference? All that stuff. This is a series again, so hopefully you're like, subscribe, following already. But if not, make sure you are. That way you get all of these. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns and gunfighting the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to be your host. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I make no apologies for that. God has blessed me to be a professional gunfighter most of my adult life in many different ways. I won't put in the normal bio today. I'll stick to what's germane to the AR-15, because that's going to play into today's episode. Marine Corps combat veteran, joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours, was also an urban warfare instructor under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. OSs in both were infantry, so a grunt. You might deduce some familiarity with the M16/AR-15 platform there. Also served as a sworn peace officer, a COP, the common vernacular, LAPD, worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments, worked with some three-letter government agencies on some of those assignments. Also been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency that I won't specify. Also was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area here, CONUS, in the United States. So you might imagine from that, I've been blessed to have a lot of experience with the AR-15 platform, and I'm going to try and be as diplomatic with this as I can while being honest. So, gunfighters, grab your e-tools and get ready to dig in to this giant sector of the gun world, the AR-15, America's rifle. Now let's start at the muzzle, the end of the barrel that the bullet comes out of. The muzzle can be just a straight, flat muzzle. You might decide you want just a regular muzzle with no device on it at all. One reason is legislation. Somehow that is deemed less scary, less violent, less whatever. So you may be mandated to not have anything on the end of your barrel. You may also choose to have nothing on the end of your barrel, and that's fine. You might want to choose that for like a hunting gun, for a target gun, for like a bull barrel or H-bar style, more precision rifle. A lot of those guns are going to be big and heavy, the DMR type rifle, so you're not gaining as much as you would be on a lighter rifle. And there's nothing wrong with just a regular barrel with nothing on the end of it. Now, most of these barrels are going to be threaded. If you wanted to make a threaded barrel more akin to just a regular barrel, you could put a thread protector on it. It just is what it sounds like. It protects the threads. However, most people are going to have some kind of muzzle device. Two big camps that these fall into: flash hiders and muzzle brakes. Let's start off with the OG one, the old 3-prong flash hider. Kind of designed, if you want to think about it, as hiding your signature for the people you're shooting at. Hides the flash. Another big benefit to both of these, which I don't think should be overlooked, is they protect the muzzle. When you slam your muzzle into something, whether that be somebody's teeth or the pavement, because you dropped it when you're getting out of the back of a deuce and a half. They protect the muzzle. Flying in a helicopter, muzzle down, shoved into the ground. Right, they protect the muzzle. That's probably the most crucial thing all of these do besides just a plain flat muzzle. They protect the muzzle. The crown, the very end of the rifling where it exits the barrel, that is generally the most important for accuracy. That I'll probably leave that in. The concentricity of that crown is crucial. So they protect that. Now, the flash hider, again, is going to protect your signature. When you're shooting at people, you're less obvious than just a fireball coming out with no flash suppressor. Now, the most common one today in the standard is the A2 bird cage, or you'll hear it referred to as a bird cage. And actually, of all the things I knock on the government specifications for, like mil spec, I actually think the A2 is a pretty good design. It does a lot of good things. It protects the muzzle. It is a flash hider, but it also, if you look at it, it doesn't have the cuts all the way around. It only has the cuts on the top portion and going down into the bottom. But the very bottom is just flat, which means some of that gas coming out is going to push down, counterbalancing a little bit the recoil. Now, in general, recoil takes the path of least resistance. So if you're a right-handed shooter, that generally tends to be up and to the right, because that's where less of your body mass is to control that weapon. So most recoil goes up and to the right. Don't believe me? You're right-handed, go grab an MP5 or full auto M16 and hold that trigger back and see if that gun doesn't go up and to the right. So that A2, it's a flash hider, but it's kind of a very minimalist break in that it tries to hold the gun down a little bit. It's not a bad design. It's lightweight, it's rugged, it's rock solid. It's not bad. If you have no other reason for any other thing, like unless there's a specific reason you want something else, there's nothing wrong with an A2. A2 is good for a lot of things. That A2 birdcage, it's a good, minimalist, affordable, well thought out, I think, flash suppressor and quasi brake. A lot of other flash suppressors on the market. A lot of the common ones are ones that you will see generally, like the Surefire, where generally you run it with a can, but without it, it's just kind of like one of the old prong flash hiders. Nothing wrong with that. Something to consider, the prong style, they are a better striking device. If you don't have a bayonet and you're going to smash that into somebody's face, which is a technique that is taught and is a real thing for CQB, they're a little bit more aggressive for that. Now the brake. The brake is for when you want to go fast. When you want to go fast. When you want to drive it fast, you'll see these almost across the board. Really high level competition shooters. You want to go fast. You want a muzzle brake. Muzzle brakes redirect that gas to hold the muzzle down, and generally you'll see big ports on the side to throw the gas out to the side to stop, to lessen the degree at which that gun comes back. And I don't care how good you control recoil, if you reduce it, you can shoot faster, all other things being equal. Like if I'm trying to shoot a series of pepper poppers or steel fall down targets at 200 yards, and they're in a line and I'm trying to track my sights, right, that muzzle brake is going to help with that. It's not all roses and sunshine though. The muzzle brakes, they are loud. They are much louder than like an A2 or just a flat muzzle. All other things being equal, meaning like same barrel length. So you can get quite loud, especially when you start getting into shorter barrels, because it should be obvious, but I'll explain it. The longer the barrel is, unless you get to the point of ridiculous, but that's not going to happen in most common centerfire calibers, the longer the barrel is, the more gas is burnt up in the barrel, meaning in general you'll have less pressure when the bullet exits. So when you put these brakes on a shorter barrel, like you want to make like a fire-breathing dragon, like a 10 or 11 inch AR and shove an obnoxious brake on it, it's going to be like a flashbang, just obnoxious. So barrel length plays a lot into that, but brakes minimize recoil, but they are loud. Flash hiders hide the flash. Both of these will protect the muzzle. Alright, that's muzzle devices. Ooh, 10 minutes and we've just talked about muzzle devices. It's gonna be a series there, ladies and gunfighters. This next bit may take up the entire rest of this episode. Barrels. We touched on barrel length, so let's start there because we got to start somewhere. 20 inch, the OG, the original. That's a rifle length. That's a rifle full length. It's what we ran in the Marine Corps. 20 inch A1, A2, A4, M16s, 20 inch barrel. What's the pro to this? You get a lot more velocity. Now, obviously, you can go longer than a 20-inch barrel. You see this in a lot of specialty DMR type rifles. And again, unless you get really crazy long, you're still going to gain velocity. But 20 inches is considered pretty long for today's standard and pretty much as long as you're usually going to see in a fighting type rifle. You get more velocity. Now, by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter is established. I'm going to throw out some numbers. This is from rifleshooter.com. I just looked for a good table. You want to verify these numbers, and this will depend on a lot of things. The type of rifling you have, literally the temperature and the humidity in the air that day. But to give you a rough idea, looking at XM193, I'm going to try to compare apples to apples. That's kind of a go-to load. That's 55 grain, a 5.56 load. It's real common. You'll see a lot of manufacturers loading for it. 20 inch, you're looking at 3306 for velocity. You're talking about an 18 inch, which is another not real common, but you do see it, 3202. And they list a 16.5, which is a little weird, but close enough to 16. So 3187 for the 16.5. The 14 is 3039. The 11 inch, dropping down to 11, is 2834. And 7 inch, if anybody wants to get that crazy, is 2410. So again, going back to the 20 inch, you're looking at 3306 per their numbers. And I think that's a little fast from what I normally see. I thought it was like 32 and something. And again, their number for the 16 inch is 3187. So obviously, you drop velocity when you drop barrel length up to a given point. Again, you can get so long you actually start losing velocity, but that's pretty rare for common fighting rifles. But shorter barrel, less velocity. The upside, more maneuverable. You saw a big swing in the Army anyway, not so much the Marine Corps, but in the Army from the full-size M16 to the M4, which is going from a 20-inch barrel to, I think the military spec is actually 14.5. A lot of the ones that you'll see on the civilian market marked in M4 are 16-inch, and that's due to the ATF rules and restrictions on SBRs. You might see a 14.5 pinned or a 16-inch that's not pinned, and that's just the nature of the beast for legality. But longer in general is going to give you more velocity. Shorter is going to generally be more maneuverable. So which do you want? There are pros and cons to both. Now let's go to the back of this barrel here and talk about chamberings. And I'm just going to talk about the 5.56 family. I'm not going to talk about the 300 blackout or dropout. Sorry, Josh. Well, let's stick with the 5.56. But 5.56 is not so common. There's 5.56. There's 223. There's 223 wild. With a Y. I'm not going to get into the minutia of the differences because even among really good experts, their opinions differ on this. But for generalities, if it's chambered in 5.56, you can shoot 5.56 or 223. If it's marked 223, which is really hard to find an AR like this made in the last several years. You might find really old ARs marked 223, but in general, they say don't fire 5.56 out of them. 223 wild is a chambering that will also let you fire both, but if done completely concentrically and everything else is equal, it's supposed to be a tighter chamber, more precise, but will still let you fire both. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but 223 wild would let you fire both with a quote-unquote tighter chamber. And again, all other things being equal, and there's a lot more that plays into accuracy than just the chambering. But should give you a more accurate result. But 5.56 is kind of the standard. Now let us dive into the world of profiles of barrel. You can get a giant bull barrel. You can get the H-bar barrel, which is kind of a heavy but still kind of quasi-tactical 80s retro cool. You don't see too many H-bar barrels anymore. But for, that like DMR, counter sniper, urban kind of role, the H-bar was kind of the standard for a while. But in general, the default today is the government profile barrel, especially talking about like an M4. I kind of hit on this in my things I didn't really like in the standard AR-15s, if there is such a thing. Government profile barrel, they're cut that profile for a lot of reasons, many of which do not apply to you. Are you mounting an M203 grenade launcher? You probably don't need a government profile barrel. That said, they're kind of the standard. If you take off the handguards and look, they're fat, obviously, by the chamber, because that's where a big chunk of the pressure is. Then they get skinny, then they get fat again, then they get skinny, then they get fat again. Again, if you're not mounting an M203, probably don't need that, but they are the most common. On a lot of the budget rifles, you'll just see kind of a medium contour barrel, like I believe the Rugers and the M&P Sporters. I think just because there's less machining, like there's less turning you have to do of the barrel. So there's that. What I think is usually the best for a fighting rifle is the OG profile, the pencil profile. I like the pencil barrel. Unless you're doing mag dumps on full auto, which is really hard to justify. Not saying it never happens, but for most people, it doesn't apply. I would take the weight savings. For me, I wish the standard was a pencil barrel, and if I wanted something else, I could get something else, but that would be the standard instead of the government profile. It saves on weight. In general, I think the gas tube is going to give out before the barrel does. And again, I'm not doing mag dumps on full auto for a lot of reasons. If you are doing mag dumps on full auto, you might want to look at like the SOCOM profile barrel. That's kind of where that shines. There's also different profiles to different manufacturers, like Faxon, I think, makes the gunner profile, which is kind of a lightweight but not a pencil. So you might want to look at that. And there's a lot of different proprietary ones for proprietary manufacturers, like the Colt H-bar and things like that. But there's a lot of different profiles. Again, government is probably for something that doesn't apply to you, but it is kind of the standard. You kind of mid-weight barrels, which are a fine go-to in general. A little bit of cost savings there. You got your pencil profile, which is generally my favorite. You got your SOCOM if you want to do heavy mag dumps. And you got your heavier ones. For, in general, more precise shooting, because as you shoot, the barrel heats up, and as you stop, it cools down. And I guess an easy way to put it is the more mass you have there, the more gradual that heating up and cooling down is. That's why you see a lot of target rifles, ARs or not, will have a big, heavy barrel. Because you get more mass, literally, even though the barrel is heating up, it's heating up at a slower rate shot per shot. So you should see less deviation in your groups shot to shot, unless you're completely letting that barrel cool down, which takes a long time. So that's kind of the point of the heavy barrel. Now you may see some fluting in AR barrels, and that gives you more surface area. And what that generally, the idea for that is letting the barrel cool down more rapidly because you have more surface area, but also saving weight. So it's kind of quasi getting a heavier barrel benefit, but shaving some of that material off so it's not actually quite as heavy. That's all well and good if it's done good and correctly. A lot of them, I think, are done for aesthetics, like the Black Rain Ordnance. I think I remember them being kind of famous for that. Just crazy fluting. But that's the idea of fluting. That's why it's a thing, other than just aesthetics. Now, let us talk about a really important part, I think, that's often overlooked. Barrel material. Kind of your chrome vanadium, chrome moly, really hard steel is your standard. And it's a good standard. Those barrels last a long time. For a long time, your standard was a cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel. We'll get to rifling in a bit. But your cold hammer forged was kind of like the standard, your premium barrel, like your really good quality FN barrels were going to be, cold hammer forged in general. And chrome lined. Chrome lining is a big deal for me, especially in the chamber, also in the bore. Chrome lined chamber and barrel. Yes, please check that box. If you're a shooter, I don't mean just like you shoot once or twice a year at the range, but you run thousands of rounds a year through a gun, maybe thousands of rounds in a training class. You get a lot of longevity out of said barrel and bore, everything else being equal. And cadence of fire matters a lot for that. Like going full auto is going to wear out a barrel a lot faster than a reasonable cadence at different targets. But that chrome lining, chrome is hard. Chrome obviously also doesn't rust. It's a really good thing. You may potentially give up some accuracy because you're adding more complexity. You're machining the barrel out and then you're adding chrome to it. So there's another potential to introduce some inconsistencies. But they've been a standard for a long time. Kind of a new standard, and what I think is even better in a lot of ways, is nitriding if it's done well. You can get poor chrome lining, you can get poor nitriding, but if done well, like a QPQ, quench, polish, quench, really good nitride, makes steel really hard, so you get that added benefit of longer life. You're not actually adding like a different, I guess it is kind of a coating, but it's hard to explain. It shouldn't really mess with the rifling or anything, so you shouldn't really be introducing much that will deter accuracy, but it can make the steel quite hard, and if done right, really impervious to rust, the elements, things like that, and it's a very slick finish. Both it and chrome are slick, which really helps with nasty, dirty guns, nasty extraction, ruptured cases, things like that. For those reasons, I really, really like either chrome or nitriding. The other big one is stainless. You'll see stainless in a lot of like high-end target ARs of different profiles, but like a really decent stainless barrel. And these because you're just machining that one material. You're like either hammer forging it or cutting different rifling in to a stainless steel barrel. Now stainless steel is obviously stainless. It's not bad. It's in general going to be softer, although it will be more precise if, they have the potential to be very precise, I should say. Any of these can be really precise if done well. But in general, a lot of really high-end precise target shooters will choose a stainless barrel, but it's a softer material than like your chrome vanadium, your chrome lining, your nitriding. So you generally don't get as long a barrel life. And again, this is really going to depend on the cadence that you fire. Are you firing 5.56 or 2.23? Are you shooting that junk Russian ammo? Going to depend a lot on that. But in general, you're going to get a lot more rounds out of a chrome-lined or nitrided chrome vanadium barrel or chrome moly barrel or something like that than you will out of a stainless barrel. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Now let's go to rifling. The barrel twist rate. I think a lot of people don't spend as much time thinking about the other aspects of the barrel, and they really overstress on the barrel twist rate. Here's the deal. 1 and 9, 1 and 8, 1 and 7. Pick one. The 1 and 7 I think was going to for the 62 grain, not regular ammo. You can shoot that just fine in a 1 and 9. It was for tracer rounds. So unless you're shooting really long 62 grain tracer rounds, probably don't need a 1 and 7. If you want to shoot really, really heavy for caliber, like your general go-to is a 77 grain or 80 something grain load, then you might want a 1 and 8 or a 1 and 7. But there's nothing wrong with a 1 and 9. Don't think that if you got a 1 and 9, it's not good enough. If you're shooting a lot of 55 grain and you want to be a little bit more precise, you're going to go even lighter, like for varmint bullets. If it's going to be like a prairie dog hunting gun or a coyote hunting gun, you may even want to go slower. I don't remember if the original M16 was a 1 in 12 or a 1 in 14. Some say that made it a little bit more lethal with bullet tumble and things like that. I don't know enough about that to quantify that or confirm that one way or the other. But just know that pretty much any modern AR with a 1 in 9 or faster. And I guess I should explain what twist rate is for those that are fairly new. How many inches does that bullet need to travel before it makes one revolution? For a 1 in 9, it travels 9 inches down the barrel and it spins once. For a 1 in 7, it'll travel one complete revolution in 7 inches. So it's faster. It's spinning faster. A lot of times you think about this as bullet weight, but that's really not that important. The weight, it's more the length. If you're shooting really long bullets, you need a faster twist rate. But again, for most modern bullets, you're shooting anywhere in the 60-ish grains, 62 grains and down. 1 in 9 is going to be fine. Anything faster than that is just fine too. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, is it a 1 in 7? It's got to be a 1 in 7, or 1 in 8 is better than 1 in 7. It's one of the most overhyped things and one of the least important to me, I think, for a practical gunfighter that's going to be shooting, common weight and types of ammo. 1 in 9, 1 in 8, 1 in 7. It's all good. You also see some stamps like MP on some barrels, like magnetical particle inspections. That's kind of important. You'll oftentimes see that by where the twist rate is. That just means it's been inspected well, for lack of getting into it in more depth. Real quick, we'll touch on rifling. Again, cold hammer forged is kind of been the standard for a long time. Not necessarily because it's the best today, but because it was the best for a long time, and it's still really good if done well. Again, like some of the really premium barrel manufacturers, cold hammer forged chrome line barrel is kind of like the standard. And you don't need that. Again, you can get really good, like nitrided barrels, but that's kind of the standard. There are other ways to make rifling. There is button, there is broach, where they're like removing material with some kind of mandrel or something like that. They're like cutting the rifling out of the inside of the barrel. Cold hammer forging is where they have like a reverse image of the rifling and they literally hammer the barrel down over top of it. And I think honestly, if these are done really well, they can all be really highly accurate. It's not just one thing that will make an AR accurate or not accurate. It's a lot of different things playing together. Maybe the upper and the barrel nut and everything and the barrel fit together. It could be the bolt face interacting with the upper. It could be all manner. It could be a number of different things. Free floating the barrel, which we'll probably won't touch on here because we'll probably get into that in like when we talk about handguards. Anyway, with that was quite a lot, and we only covered muzzle devices and barrels. Oh, and I guess we should probably cover it here because it's going to be in this part of the barrel, and I might forget it later. You'll see a lot of things like M4 feed ramps. The original M16, if you look, it basically just has that star cutout. And if you look at the M4 feed ramps, you have two big gouges, for lack of a better word, two big trenches on either side, because generally that's where the bullets ride up. If you look at like a double stack AR-15 magazine, you'll have the bullets next to each other. And when that goes up, you'll see these called M4 feed ramps, the M4 style. It's a newer style. Mostly that's a default, I think, for most things today. And I don't want to forget about it when I cover later stuff. So it's basically how you're feeding that round into the barrel. The rifle length ones, I don't think it makes much difference. They went to it with the M4. There's no reason not to have it. And just like accuracy, a lot plays into reliability, especially magazines, bullet type, bullet profile, a bunch of different stuff, buffer tubes, buffer weights. But those M4 feed ramps, if you see that as a feature, it's generally considered a good thing. I don't really see any negatives to it that I'm aware of. But that kind of the feed ramps that feed the round into the chamber. Whether you have the M4 feed ramps or not, just remember that that area is a pain in the butt to clean. Okay, with that, this is going to conclude, I think, this portion. This episode 1 in this mini-series. Kind of feels like Lonesome Dove. It's pretty long. But people love the ARs, and the AR episodes do pretty well. So, alright, with that, the tactical tip of the day. Remember how I said that the crown, where the bullet exits, should be concentric? You shouldn't want to mess with it you shouldn't want to mess it up for really any reason. You can, in fact, mess that up with a cleaning rod, with a cheap garbage cleaning rod. I think I have probably, everybody worries about, is the gun shot out? Is the gun shot out? And I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people worry about how many rounds have been through it. Has it been shot out? In my experience, I've seen far more guns and barrels messed up because of improper cleaning rather than being shot out. That's pretty rare for a gun to be shot out. It can happen, especially for a competition shooter. But in general, it's a lot more likely that somebody's going to drag a cheap crap aluminum cleaning rod that's dirty and mess up a little bit of the crown of that barrel. So don't do that thing. Use a good coated cleaning rod if you're going to use a fixed cleaning rod, or literally just use a bore snake. I would rather somebody just use a bore snake with some CLP, and then every once in a while use like a good coated cleaning rod than somebody every time they shoot shoving a cheap segmented cleaning rod back and forth through the barrel. I don't want it. I don't like it. Should be obvious, but I will say make sure you clean from the breech. Clean the barrel in the way the bullet travels down the barrel, from the breech to the muzzle. Period. Use a bore snake or use a good coated cleaning rod and mind that muzzle. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day, hopefully what you've been waiting for and care about more than AR-15s. From the Psalms. I cried out to you, Lord. I said, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give your attention to my cry, for I have been brought very low. I think a lot of times we can identify with David and a lot of his psalms and emotions and feelings and thoughts coming out in the Psalms. I don't know what season you're in life. I don't know what you're going through. But good times or bad, it's always good to turn to God for strength. When you're going to praise, when you need help, when you're angry, in whatever circumstance. Turn to God. It's always the right answer to seek God. With that, thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.